Hello and welcome back. I'm excited for today's class where we're going to learn how to make our very own API using Python. Now, we can't just use Python for this, we're going to use Django. It's a framework we can use on top of Python to make the API. Now, it's going to look something like this, so let's go over what we're going to make. Here for the example, we're going to use Athena Health's data, which is publicly available, where they give us a list of doctors and their specialties. So we're talking about thousands of doctors publicly available for us to make an app with, either to read or to analyze data with, or many other things. But you can see that the data is in raw format like this, in JSON format. Well, we're going to make the same thing, but then we're going to make a different app that's going to analyze that data and use it to make interesting things. Well, when we go to this URL right here, this is basically a GET request. And when we land on it, after waiting a while, we arrive here. So now we need to make sense of this data. Well, we really see fairly quickly that most of the interesting data is in entry, where we can find the practice ID of that practitioner. And then later on, we can find the name of the person and the family name, as well as other things, the qualification, and certain code information needed for further querying, right? Doctor of Medicine. Okay, so let's get into how we're going to get this data out of here. We made a script called main.py, and we're going to go over it to understand how we're going to be able to get our own data once we make that. Well, on line 18, we have the URL, and then on line 20, we get that data by calling the getDataFromEndpoint function, defined right above. It's fairly simple. It uses the requests module, which we talked about earlier, but it's the standard for using get and post requests. And once we have a 200 code success, we convert it to JSON and return it. So now that this is the data, we set a variable called finish to false. Now, we're going to do something until false is true. So we introduce a while loop. We're going to say, print the data and get the next URL. And based on that, determine if we should keep getting more data or not. Let's look at the next URL here. This is where we're going to pull from. There's a section called link. And it's an important concept to understand when you're pulling data using a REST API. If there's a lot of data, if you're making a serious app and you have lots of data, you can't just have one page of it. It's going to be hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of records. So you're going to need a system for fetching the next piece of data you want to get. And it can't just be any data, it has to be based on the filters you've set originally. So here they've come up with a system of a URL that's presented to you for what to do to get the next page. Or the previous page, but since we're on page number 1, there is no previous page. If we were to go to page number 2, let's check it out. You can see that it adds that param. And now there is a previous link, page number 1. So with this in mind, we build our system saying, okay, is there going to be a link? How many pages are there? Look what happens when you get to this page. So if there's this many pages, let's say that we actually want to go to the last page. Is there going to be a next URL? No, there's not. That's why our logic looks like this. If it's empty, if it's an empty string, because it's not going to be null, then just make finished true and stop the while loop. Otherwise, keep getting that data and print it out. First print it, then get more of it, print it, get more of it. Now the print data looks like this. It's a for loop that looks at the entry object and goes to the person, goes to the name like we talked about, but since the name has multiple entries, We go to the first one and get the text. We get the practice ID that we looked at earlier, and we get their coding. So when we run it, it looks something like this. Kind of a slow API. See? The name, the ID, and the metadata we need. And it's going to go on for quite a while. That's what's nice about this system. Now we could do many things with it. We could save it to a database, we could save it as a file, we could do anything we want. But now we know how to control, how to go back to the previous state and keep going forward until there is no more data. So that's what we're going to build ourselves with our own data, with our own logic. I'll see you at the next time.